Ravens flock, what's going on? I wanted to salute to Robert Griffin III, aka RG3. He had just did a episode on his podcast talking about Lamar Jackson and what it was like being in the room with Joe Flacco and Lamar Jackson when Lamar Jackson got drafted. And it was very interesting hearing him kind of break his silence on that era of the Ravens and kind of talk about what it was like from his perspective. I feel like he kind of downplayed the situation. Like he hinted at Joe not liking Lamar, but he didn't flat out say it. He just said, yeah, it was awkward. Now, I don't think Joe Flacco liked Lamar at all. It is what it is. I'm not saying Joe Flacco is a bad person. I just think that we saw enough of for us that was there at the time. Joe clearly was not interested in trying to pass the torch to Lamar. He felt slighted. At the end of the day, they just went out in the first round and picked up a young QB out of Louisville who clearly is meant to be your replacement. I'm not trying to, justify Joe having a sort of standoff attitude towards Lamar, but I'm just saying it is what it is, unfortunately. Like, we all wish that quarterbacks would have that sort of Alex Smith or Jimmy Garoppolo sort of attitude when it comes to a team drafting a QB that's clearly meant to replace you. Like, obviously, in the case of Alex Smith, he was the Chiefs quarterback when they drafted Patrick Mahomes. And then Jimmy Garoppolo, he was the 49ers quarterback when they drafted Trey Lance and Brock Purdy a year ago. And they had more of that mature approach of, hey, I'll help him any way I can. We'll kind of figure it out. And, they just kind of went their separate ways peacefully, at least publicly. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but at least publicly, they kind of just peacefully just took a step back and let it go. Whereas in the case of Joe had more of that Ryan Tannehill sort of energy, where obviously, as we know, last year, the Titans, they drafted Malik Willis. Many people thought that, hey, this guy could replace Ryan Tannehill. And when the media asked Ryan Tannehill, his response was just really saying, hey, man, it's not my job to train this kid. I just got to do what I got to do. But again, it was clear as day that Lamar was going to be the replacement, and it should have been that way. Look, and I said this a couple years ago when I made a video saying that, hey, Lamar has already surpassed Joe Flacco, right? At the end of the day, even though we all respect Joe Flacco's Super Bowl run, and it was clearly one of the greatest runs we've ever seen, at the end of the day, that was really just one specific playoffs. That was one season. That was one specific playoff run in that year. Excuse me. Not to say he didn't have other years where he played good in the playoffs, but in general, most of the hype that the Ravens flock gives to Joe Flacco is really based on that 1 year. And again, that's cool because we still got the ring, but at the same time, I feel like that ring at times, especially when I did that video a few years ago, it clouded a lot of people's perspective or their perception of Joe Flacco and what he really was. And I said this even in that video a couple years ago. I said, look, Joe Flacco was never really that great of a quarterback. He was good. He was clutch in the playoffs when it mattered most. I compared him to kind of like that Eli Manning caliber quarterback where in the regular season it wasn't that impressive, but he had some of the better playoff moments we've ever seen. But throughout his career, he was always middle of the pack. So again, I don't know what the ages are of people who are watching this video, but for anybody who may be too young to remember, Joe Flacco in a contract year in 2012, we barely made the playoffs, but still we snuck in and we went on this crazy run where we beat a bunch of, Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks and teams. And we won the whole Super Bowl in 2012/2013. That same offseason, Joe Flacco got a big contract. He was the highest paid quarterback in the league. And from that moment on, we didn't do anything. We just were a mediocre team from that point on. Joe Flacco just went back to kind of just being who he was, which was just a middle of the pack quarterback. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, at some point, you were gonna have to make a move. And luckily for us, in 2018, they decided, with Lamar Jackson still available at the end of the first round, to just make that move. Now, I don't even think, to this day, I don't even think the Ravens fully believed Lamar was going to be who he's become. I really don't. Because if they did, there's no way they would have drafted Hayden Hurst first in that. Because, again, for the people that forgot, we technically had 2 first-round draft picks. The first one was the 27th pick. And then we traded Philly for the 32nd pick. But I to this day, I don't believe Ozzie and the Ravens truly believed Lamar was going to be this good. I just think it was a matter of they just rolled the dice and they got lucky, they hit. Because if you had any clue, if any team that year had any clue just how great he was going to be, there's no way you would risk letting him pass you because you wanted to draft Hayden Hurst, who wasn't even the best tight end in that class, because we got Mark Andrews in the 3rd round. But that's neither here nor there. But still, long story short, Lamar didn't start most of his rookie season. Joe Flacco was still the starter, but Joe Flacco, if I'm not mistaken, hurt his hip or something. He ended up sitting out for a bit. They at that time we had a losing record. They plugged Lamar in, and immediately we started winning every single game. We made it to the playoffs. He saved John Harbaugh's job, literally. And, the rest is history. They made Lamar the full-time starter and called it a day. But hearing RG3 give his perspective on that whole time period where they're where they're trying to coach up Lamar and really, mentor him and give him any tips that they can. Joe Flacco, not so much, because he said, in RG3's words, he said that Joe's approach was just, hey, I'll just lead by example, just kind of watch me. I'm not going to explain it, which sounds like a nice way of saying that Joe Flacco didn't mess with Lamar, so he didn't speak to him. But then, obviously, as RG3 continues the story, he says that there was a moment eventually later in the season where Joe finally came around and decided to kind of join in with RG3 and, talking Lamar up and coaching him up and giving him tips on different plays and, the offense in the NFL. And again, that was very cool to see because it made me just think about just the power of mentorship and just how important it can be and how lucky people are when they get it, if they get it. Because again, it's not guaranteed. Many people like myself and many others, we don't really have experience with a bunch of mentors, really. So, and it's tough when you're trying to do great things and you don't have that mentor because, again, in many cases, you're trying to figure it out. Or in many cases, you may try to seek out some sort of a mentor, but it ends up not working out because they might sabotage you. And the sabotage could come from different angles. On one angle, it could come from the fact that they're jealous because they may look at you, they may see your potential, and because they don't like you, they don't like your potential, they view you as a threat. Instead of them just rocking with you and saying, nah, let's support this person, let them do their thing. Let's really do whatever we can for them to let them try to, get to the next level, whatever. Instead of them doing that, you have some people, because they feel threatened, they would rather talk down to you, try to pull you down, try to, make you question yourself, try to do anything they can to bring you back to their level. Because many people don't want to see you do better than they did. And then also another way that failed mentorships can happen is when you're trying to seek out mentorship, but unfortunately you're surrounded by people who have never accomplished what you're trying to be mentored in. That happens too. Sometimes you're trying to seek out some guidance or advice from somebody who you consider like an elder or whatever, but they themselves have never really done it. They themselves have never done anything of significance. So taking their advice, in many cases, it cannot work out because they don't really know what they're talking about. But I do believe Lamar was definitely very lucky and fortunate because in the case of him being mentored by RG3 and even Mike Vick, I know him and Mike Vick are fairly close, but I'm going to use RG3 as an example because obviously they played on the team at the same time. Him having a guy like RG3 who had a similar playing style to him, who knows what it's like to be a dual threat quarterback, who had those super high moments of being rookie of the year, making the Pro Bowl, winning his division, like just setting the league on fire, but then also having the low moments of, when everything just fell apart, and him being able to kind of teach you his mistakes or teach you how to avoid his mistakes. That's extremely powerful. Because like RG3 said in the clip, when he was, he was in Washington playing for the Redskins, now the Commanders, but at that time the Redskins, he didn't really have that. Like, if I'm not mistaken, I think the quarterback room at that time, it was him, Kirk Cousins, and like one other person or whatever. So like, he not only did he not have anybody who wanted to kind of help him, but he definitely didn't have anybody who played like him in the room who wanted to help him. So again, that was definitely cool to hear. Even hearing Joe Flacco eventually came around to want to help Lamar too. That's even cooler to hear too. Because again, even though Joe didn't have the same playing style, he also, like RG3, had moments in the NFL where he reached great heights. Obviously, with winning a Super Bowl, making that crazy playoff run. So I do believe that's definitely played a role in Lamar's development. And then RG3 himself said that his greatest achievement, what he believes is his greatest achievement, is being able to help mentor Lamar and watch him develop into that MVP quarterback who set the league on fire. So it definitely was interesting to see. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Do you think RG3 really played a major role in Lamar's development, or do you think he's exaggerating? And do you believe that Joe Flacco really couldn't stand Lamar, or do you think that maybe that was just kind of rumors that were overblown? Let me know what your thoughts are on everything in the comment section below.